started.
My name is Tino.
Alright, welcome to Django District. Who is new here? Really? Welcome everyone. We like new people. My name is Eddie. I'm filling in for Chris, who couldn't be here, and Jackie, who couldn't be here. They don't love our speakers at all. They're jerks. No, they actually love our speakers and set this up. Let's see, there were a couple things that I was supposed to say. I'll keep this brief and then we'll do it around the room, like introduce yourself, who are you, what do you do, how bad do you think Eddie smells, shut up Ken. And that's that. So first of all, I guess, do we have any community announcements? I'm going to make this sound formal. Anybody? Going once?
You mean like other meetups?
Or anything.
Jobs,
meetups, anything that you think the room would be interested in.
We got lots of jobs.
Thank you!
Oh no, we don't have jobs. We need people for the jobs. Kevin and I work at HCDG out in Rockville, and we're actually looking for people to join our team. So if anyone's interested, come and chat with me. We'd love to have you come out and find out a little more about our company.
Cool. Anything else? Anybody?
Yeah, I could jump in on that too, but we're trying to fill a position. We may have a guy, but it wouldn't hurt that word.
Same place?
No.
No?
Always have a place.
Well, what's yours?
I work for Atlantic Media, specifically Government Executive Media Group. I'm the developer there. We have one vacancy for a mid-level developer.
Cool.
Django.
Cool. Anyway, anybody else? If not, these are the two people that you want to speak to. Going once? Going twice?
You want to speak to me?
Well, I didn't say you necessarily want. Well, it depends. Anyway, all right. So that is number one. Business administrative stuff. Number two. We have two speakers tonight, and thank you both for coming. We've got Ben. We've got Kobe. Search and front end ish something. We're looking for more speakers. We don't have anybody lined up for a little while. I'm not sure what they have next month. I think they've got it planned for next month, but there are vacancies. So if you have an interest in speaking or telling us anything about what you've done that's Django related, please do so. Because we're always looking for it. Yeah, Jen. I know, we already got her. She's going to look at me and tell me how to do it. Yeah, so anyway, always looking for speakers. So if you are interested or know somebody who is, please email the mailing list. And on that note, I think it's introduction time. Hi, I'm Eddie. I've been boring you for the last 3 or 4 minutes. Nice to talk to you. I guess we'll do what tonight? Favorite color, favorite food, or thing that you know about Django? Any requests, takers at all? Let's do all three. Okay. I'm Eddie. My favorite color is yellow. My favorite food is either pesto or tacos. Depends on what time of day you talk to me. And we just got done with a project where I work for NIH, National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, and I work specifically for the National Center for Biotechnology Information. We've got a whole bunch of developers, and we're finally getting rid of our C++ based everything. C++ plus XSLT. We're tossing in the garbage. And we're saying, okay, we're going to explore new frameworks. And we just got done Django, which was yay. And then we got just done Rails, which went, whew. And now we're starting Spring, which is, so that's why I'm a zombie. Next.
Oh man, my name's Ben. I work at Wildfire Interactive. My favorite color is blue.
What color? Blue.
Blue.
Blue. You know.
I'm not going to give a Pantone number. My favorite food, I'm just going to go with Italian beef, in case anyone knows what that is.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't really know if I know anything about Django to share with you guys, which is awkward.
Well, not yet. It will be in about 5 minutes.
Django was just Python. That's what I told somebody last night to try and spur him on. So.
All right, let's start.
Okay, I'm Kobe. I work at Wildfire Interactive as well. My favorite color is forest green. And my favorite food is probably the garlic steak at Kobe Michelle.
I don't know what that is, but garlic steak sounds good.
Yeah, it's like marinated all day.
I like garlic.
And I'll give a talk later on some front end stuff, so you'll find out if I know anything about Django.
Nice.
Hi, my name is Gavin. Favorite color blue.
What color blue?
Blue.
Blue, alright.
Favorite food is chicken korma.
Ooh, good call.
Okay. And then I'm pursuing my master's in computer science at GW.
Cool.
At the same time, I'm working as automation intern at Science Logic.
Interesting.
I'm Brian Scott, as previously stated, lead developer at Government Executive Media Group. Favorite color, green, undeclared variant, I don't know. And
Like 0255
you know, it's somewhere around there.
Okay, cool.
Took part in building a Django-based CMS. It's probably too much to talk about right now.
That works.
Hi, I'm Jason. My favorite color is blue also. Same blue as everyone else.
I should be counting this out, right?
Right now this is a blue and green.
This is a blue crew, so sorry.
I also work with Brian, and I just started new to Python and Django. Yeah,
Cool. Well, welcome. Yeah.
I did Java in spring before that.
Nice. So I'm going to come to you later and ask you all kinds of questions. Make your ears bleed? No?
I'm Sam. Working at Biscuits right now, and favorite color is dark pink.
Nice.
Like
Alright.
dark metal. Yes. And then
And what food do you pair that with?
I like steaks.
Steaks.
Oh,
Steaks with dark pink.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
French fries.
Oh, French fries. We've got French fries here too.
And Django, I don't know what I know about Django that's interesting. Fast-paced views is pretty cool. I've been playing around with that to, instead of Piston, to do my own just APIs recently. The thing about that is, if you want to serialize your own models, because Piston does that stuff for you, it's pretty non-trivial. It's like many-to-many relationships, branches, like difficult to be.
Interesting. Cool.
Hi, I'm Jen. Also next to you can see me. My favorite color is green. My favorite food is brie cheese, preferably with a baguette. And Django related, I built a project, so I was talking to these guys about it earlier, with Backbone Marionette and Django together. So if you're interested, I can talk about that.
Hi, I'm Man. It's pronounced like man with an I in front of it. Man. My favorite color is also green. I'm not original, I guess.
None of this crew is, so don't worry about that.
My favorite food is marzipan. What do I know about Django? I have recently been in charge of re-architecting Internet 2 where I worked, our entire web infrastructure out of Cold Fusion and into Django.
No, I mean, that's awesome.
I'm coming off of a combination of Cold Fusion, PHP, and various frameworks,
Oh, dear God.
and JSP, and Ruby on Rails, and now we just finished architecting that. We should be launching that fairly soon, and we're gonna be starting a project which is gonna involve a lot of JavaScript front-end stuff. So I don't feel confident at all in my JavaScript skills, which are like 0.
Does anybody really?
So,
I mean, seriously.
Not even people were
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to this topic. And,
Other than Crockford, nobody feels confident about JavaScript, so don't worry about that. Next.
My name is Ryan. My favorite color is gray. No, it's actually blue, but I was going to say something different. I work at a small company called Industry Dive on the corner, and I'm just getting into Django. I'm one of the front-end people that does mostly CSS and HTML, graphic design stuff. So here to learn.
Cool. And
Oh, favorite food? Salmon with tomato pesto.
Hi, my name is Nahom. I work at Victor O'Shinner in Friendship Heights. We're in the insurance industry. My day job doesn't involve anything to do with computers, really. So I'm learning Python on my own and started using Django to develop a little web app just for my own education.
excellent.
As far as favorite food, I'm torn between lasagna and injera, which is Ethiopian food. And as far as favorite color, I guess yellow.
Nice. Bringing up the rear is what we're doing.
Hey, I'm Brian. I'm working at Tech Change now, and I'm a senior at GW, almost done. Favorite color, I'll go with dark blue, not just blue. Favorite food, New York pizza, not New York style.
Nice.
And Django stuff. This summer I took a forked version of Django 1.4 and moved it over to regular Django 1.5 and had to go in and find out all the changes people made in the year before me and kind of work that in without actually modifying Django itself. That was fun.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I'm Fletcher. I'd say green and green curry.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's an excellent pairing.
I founded Real Python, which was originally a course to teach introductory Python, but we're teaching web frameworks now too, so including Django, a lot of Django. And I work right now at TrackMaven, a startup around the block. We're building a competitive intelligence platform, and it's all Python and Django based.
I'm Miriam. I work with Ryan over at Industry Dive. My favorite color is purple. Before you ask, it's purple. It's the whole range.
Sweet.
I apparently don't know much about Django because I'm using an old version, according to Brian over here.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I'm passingly fond of chocolate.
My name is Brian. I work at the Motley Fool. Color blue, food, whatever I'm eating at the time.
Well played.
Favorite thing about Django, I'm going to go with the fact that it is Python as well. I have to agree with you on that one. MRO and args and quargs, I love to use them.
Nice.
My name's Kate. My favorite color is orange. My favorite food is probably guacamole. I am a new developer transitioning over from biotech, biochemistry, basic research, and I just finished a 6-month internship building out a CMS in Django. So I'm still learning.
Hey, my name's Tino. Let's see, my favorite color is forest green. Yes.
Okay.
My favorite food in the winter is dumplings, because it's too hot to eat dumplings in the boiled dumplings in summer.
I agree with both of those statements.
And let's see, what I like about Django is that our alternative was PHP on the back end, and yeah, so Django.
So you went to PHP, right?
What?
I'm sorry. Flashback. I'm sorry. This is my apologies.
No, PHP on the back end, not just PHP. PHP on the back end. So you know, to do nothing web related. So it was, so nice. I'm really happy that we are working with Django.
Excellent.
Hi, Colin. I work at ACDG. Favorite color is dark purple. Favorite food is crispy duck. Favorite thing about Django, probably the community. I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on. I actually just made a bug fix to local shop if anyone wants to set up their own pie. So it's probably one of my favorite things, just the Django community.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Kevin Basic. I also work at HCDG. Favorite color would be orange, but anyone who works at HC would know why that is. Favorite food is probably brisket in all of its different forms, as long as it's been cooked very slowly. Random thing about Django, the cache middleware sucks. It doesn't do anything if you have Google Analytics running on your site, because the cookies for Google Analytics will change pretty much every request and will cause the cache to invalidate for pretty much every request. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you should strip some of your Google Analytics cookies and
that
another middleware predating it, or do something else.
Do you share that with everybody that you meet that uses Django?
Yeah, you
Because
should.
it's really good to know.
Although you just kind of give the rest of the room homework.
A little bit. Yeah, maybe we'll put up a GIF or something with the middleware.
Yeah, you should.
But yeah, so that's my story.
Cool.
My name is Matthew. I work at HZ also. My favorite color is blue also, and I like lots of food, I don't know. And I run Django Image Kit. And yeah.
My name's Chris. I like green and shrimp, and I would say my green shrimp. Green shrimp. Well, depends on the day.
No, it doesn't.
Yes. And I really like. I guess my favorite library, or one of my favorites, is ImageKit, and also.
Wow.
Settings, just to,
wow, that was awesome.
My name's Josh. I work for a small consulting firm doing mostly JavaScript right now. My favorite color is that one, the border of Django con, burnt orange. Beautiful. Favorite food is probably falafels. And my favorite Django thing is class-based views and forcing myself to use them in a website and making stuff.
Cool.
My name is Martin. My favorite color, I guess, is black. I don't really have a favorite food, but I guess I'd say cheeseburgers, because a good cheeseburger is...
You're not going to lose any fans in the room by saying that. That's a given, so.
Don't really... I think Django's so incredible, I have tons of favorite things about it. My least favorite thing about Django might be form sets. I've had to work with that a lot lately.
Yeah.
I'm Brant Fitzsimmons. I work for Nat Geo. Let's see, my favorite color is blue. My favorite food is Taglerini Picky Paku.
You made that
Just
up.
like mom.
No, I swear it's right. Let's see, random fact about Django. I love Django, but I wish it had the ability to do non-blocking operations in views.
Yeah.
Mr. Sunlight?
I'm Mr. Sunlight, and my name's Bob. I'm a developer at Sunlight Labs. We're hosting tonight. Welcome to Sunlight. My favorite color is transparency.
Ooh, we got a nerd on our hands.
My favorite food is a cheesesteak, and I think, random thing about Django, I don't know, I really like using the template tags. I really like using some of the custom template tag libraries that we've developed here for things like glossary type things to maintain definitions as something that can be mapped to a model, but easily injected into throughout pages, matching on strings.
Next.
My name is Mitchell. I'm sorry, I was spaced out there. Now you can hear me.
No, it's okay. I mean,
favorite color is
we'll
black.
give you a break if you struggle with your name. So.
Favorite color is black. Favorite food, plain old burger. What else was I supposed to say? Oh, Django. Just Python. I mean, I'm a pretty plain dude, so all the basics work fine.
We'll take that. We'll take that.
I'm Greg. I work at the Washington Post. Favorite color is blue. Favorite food is pumpkin pilly French toast and milkshakes.
Wow.
For the people interested in class-based views, there's something called Django Vanilla. I haven't tried it out yet, but Adrian Holiday just shared it. A simplified way of handling class-based views. So that's pretty interesting.
And last but not least, favorite color, food, and what you like about Django. Because, I'm running this gig.
Well, okay, so color, blue, sushi, whatever. I don't really care.
I work with him, and this is what he's like at work too.
so Django, I think. So for us, what works hopefully is that so Python is more productive than other languages that we've historically worked with, and the other thing is that there is generally one way to do things so that people don't deviate too much, and basically if I'm looking at your stuff, I can figure it out and I can fix it. We're trying to basically impose a sort of a way to build things.
Yeah.
As opposed to.
And by the way, his name is Common.
Yeah.
He didn't actually mention that. All right, without further ado, we will get to our presenter. One last thing, though. We would like to thank Sunlight for hosting. So, everybody round of applause. And,
all right, we're going to talk about search today. So I'm just going to jump right in. A little bit of the background. Again, I'm Ben. I'm not going to go through the favorite food and colors. I'm actually based in Richmond as of a few months ago, but still DC is my home and business home. This is a talk. I'll give you a little structure for the talk, a little background. This is a talk I gave at DjangoCon earlier this month, I guess. And originally gave here, kind of gave a version of it. It was a 35-minute talk at DjangoCon. I'm going to try and on the fly compress it a little bit. So we're going to try and just hit some of the really key points. A couple assumptions about the talk. It's going to assume that you have a decent working knowledge of Django. If you don't, if you're new to it, that's fine. If you have questions, ask them. It does not really assume that you have a whole lot of knowledge, a whole lot of experience with search. So we're going to do an intro there. Right? And I wish I'd done this before. Could I just do a show of hands of anyone who's done any work with search engines or integrating? Wow, all right. I'll take your corrections at the end. Cool. So here's some more structure for the talk. What I really want to do is kind of give some motivation for what we're talking about with the search problem. Explain how you use a search engine. I've seen a lot of questions on Stack Overflow, some on IRC, on mailing lists, for people using these tools and not really having a good understanding of why and how to use them. Some really cool features that you can use in a search engine that you might know about, maybe you're not really familiar with. And then, of course, the crux is going to be, hey, search and Django and integrating the two, how you might go about doing that, and then some of the things to look out for. So here's the search problem in a nutshell. All right, this is it. You have text in some form of a corpus, a whole bunch of text documents, and you want to find something in there. Okay, that's what it comes down to. There's more to it, but this is the crux of the problem. Now, it may be that what you're searching for is a document that's actually indexed in your search engine. It may be that text describes something else. And so that's what I want to kind of explain this differentiation here between searching for and looking for. I think this is very important. When people type in words, let's say in a search engine like Google, to search something, they're searching for what's in those words. That may not be what they're looking for. What they're looking for may not, so you might have two people type in the same search queries looking for different things. And they might be looking for the same thing and type in different search queries. So you have to keep this in mind, and we're going to get to that, but that's just something I want you to keep in mind. I think it's a very important differentiation. So let's give some examples. Now, I mentioned Google, but Google is a web search engine. That's not what we're talking about. So let's say you have an e-commerce site. I don't know, like a small outdoors equipment site. People can search things. This probably looks very familiar to you because any half-decent e-commerce site with a lot of products has a search engine, and it looks very similar to this. You have different facets here, categories for your products. You can search for them by name. Maybe research, a library site. You could be searching for, if you're searching for books, that's a good example, and products too, a good example of a thing you're looking for doesn't exist itself in like the search engine. The document, it does. You're just using descriptive text. Logging. This is an increasingly popular use of search. You want to have lots of massive data, and massive amounts of data, and you want to search through it to find, let's say, when and what happened. So again, I mentioned we're not talking about Google. We don't care about Google right now. I think it'd be good to start with the definition of what a search engine is, and it's a really simple. It's just a queryable inverted index of document space and filter tokens. So we can move on because everyone got that. Most people did, I think, but we'll go through and explain what all this things mean. So, queryable inverted index of document space and filter tokens. So when you have documents, you have a bunch of text. Let's say it's a newspaper article. The first thing you do when you send it to a search engine is you tokenize it. You break it apart into its components. These are the tokens. Okay, you might break this apart based on words. There's other ways you can tokenize it. That's a pretty common way of doing it. So if we have the sentence here, these are not the joys you're looking for. We've broken it up into tokens. Each of these words is considered a token. Okay. And then we're going to filter it. Here's the original tokens, and we've filtered them out. Some of the filters are probably obvious. We've removed certain words. You don't really want to search for, in the English language, articles. but those are so common, they're not going to be that useful here. We lowercase, we only want to compare lowercase to lowercase. And see, looking to look. We've done some stemming. We've said, okay, here's a word, let's look at the various ways we could write it out. And index, this is the important thing. We've taken all those tokens and we've stored them in the index. And so we can look those tokens up later. We can match tokens from a query against tokens in a document. And documents, this is the important thing. We're talking about Django later, and you've probably got a lot of data in a relational database, but ultimately in the search engine, it's using documents. So think about NoSQL maybe, this concept, that's how a search engine works, okay? We'll talk about later how you map the data in, but that's what the search engine works with. So what are we talking about? Talking about Elasticsearch, Solr, perhaps Whoosh, Zapier, Sphinx. I'll be talking about Elasticsearch a little bit later. If you're working with search in a production environment, you're probably going to be working with Elasticsearch or Solr. Solr, probably more likely. These are both based on Lucene, and it's a really mature, robust search library. They're documents, right? So why not just use NoSQL? You could use something like Mongo, because they're just documents, but that means you're going to be switching. There's two things to consider. One is, is there a real reason you want to switch from, let's say, Postgres to Mongo? Because, we're searching documents? Probably not. And something like Mongo is not going to have the same search capabilities as a dedicated search engine. So this begs the question that we need to move out of the database. You can do full text search in the database. Postgres can do this. There are some benefits, though, to doing this in a search engine, and one of them I think we'll get to is really that it's really good at handling heterogeneous data. That's just one of the benefits, and it's probably going to be, I think, a lot simpler to get going, even though you're dealing with a separate service. So let's get to, again, instead of moving fast, if anyone has any questions at any point, just throw your hand up or throw a pen. There's two things we want to talk about with the search engine. It's getting data in and getting data out. It's not quite as simple as just taking data and just, take this and throw it in here. You need to somehow map your data. So when you take your data, this document, you have this text, and when you dump it into your search engine, you have one tool that's going to be really important, and that's an analyzer. Okay, this is the tool that we're going to use to take text, to tokenize it and filter it, and get it into your database, and to do that same thing to your queries. You can match up filtered tokens in your search what's in your index. Okay, and it's just a tokenizer plus a filter, or a series of filters. That's all analyzers are. I think it's very important to understand this, though, rather than just think, I just have data and just goes into the search engine. Why can't I find what I'm looking for? It's because there's a tool set there, analyzer. You need to understand how that works. Based on tokenizers, these are some ways you can tokenize your text. You can do it based on white space. Say, hey, where there's white space, that delimits where there's a new token. You can use n-grams. N-grams basically taking components of words too, like letter combinations. This is a really good way for doing things like autocomplete. And then you'll filter it. You might want to use lowercase filtering. That's a pretty good one to use. Removing stop words, you can use synonyms. I think there's a whole bunch of filters together. This is really key, though, that when you're indexing your content, your analyzers are language specific. If you have multiple languages you're dealing with, you need to have separate indexes and analyze each language differently. Okay? If you want to understand why do I need to do this, just think about stemming. You can't stem words the same way you do in English as you can in most other languages. This just does not work. You have to have language-specific analyzers. So we get data in, we get it out by querying. Yes, Jen?
The search engines that you mentioned, they come with analyzers?
Yes.
So I don't have to actually worry about that.
Right. You could...
Unless there was some deep knowledge that I had of my data that I wanted to write my own.
Right, so you can define your... I'm just trying to think of how deep I want to go right now. Given that an analyzer is just a tokenizer with filters, you can construct your own. Basically say, use this tokenizer with these filters. And if those don't exist, well, you just write your own, but you'd probably be doing that better job. using the same basic system. So getting data out, there's some interesting things you can do getting that data out that make it really useful for people who are, again, looking for things. You can facet. Faceting is just going through, it's basically characteristics of the data. These reduce down to the set. As the set of documents reduces, the facets will too, because they only describe what's in that document set. We do some spell checking, basically giving people examples of, hey, you were looking for this, maybe you're looking for something else. Geospatial search. I don't know if I'm going to get to this later, but this is something that's really helpful in and of itself. By itself, it's not that awesome to have a search engine do this. PostJS does this really well, but you can combine this with textual search. Mentioned autocomplete. You can show people what they search for, kind of give them a little bit of help, some guidance. Say, why did this match your search? You can search other documents too. You're searching like binary documents. Again, we're just searching text. So as long as you can take the text of something else and dump it in and index it, you can search that. But that's the intro. That was stuff we had to talk about. Let's get into the Django stuff. Okay, and I'm going to talk about one library in specific, and that's Haystack. Haystack's a library which I can claim no credit at all. It's written by Daniel Lindley and a bunch of contributors. I think Chris is actually one of the core contributors. And it is, you can kind of think of it as like an ORM for a search engine. It's a very loose analogy, but it might be helpful to go with. And I mentioned that one of my favorite things about Django is that it's just Python. Haystack is just a Pythonic abstraction. This is something I'd like you guys to keep in mind. This is not to diminish what it does for you, but if you keep in mind that this is all it is, there's no magic. I think it's really helpful understanding how it works and what you can do with it. It is ORM oriented. There's two parts to understanding this. One is that you can kind of think of it like an ORM for all the data you have in your search engine. But more importantly, the second part is that it's really oriented around data in the Django ORM. So if you're using a separate system, or if you want to index and query data that is not managed in models like Django ORM models, Haystack might not be the best tool for you. Okay? It's really oriented around mapping data from your models, putting it in the search index, and getting it out related to your models. So I think it's really helpful to understand some of the key components, and I'm going to cover 4, but there are really 2 that are key to understand. The first is the search index, and this is what you define as kind of like your models. This is how you define the data that goes into Haystack. This is, I think, the most important part, the most important component. And all this is it's a mapping of data from the ORM into a document in the index. That's all it does. There's more to it. You can define how you want your data analyzed, when you want it to go in, but ultimately you're just saying, hey, there's a document, here are the fields that are going to go into it, and they're going to come from this model or these models. That's all it is. But it is really the crux of, and I think the most important part of Haystack. The other is the search query set, and this is kind of analogous to a query set in the Django ORM. You're going to pull data out, and it's an API that's very similar to the query set, but it is pulling data out of the index. You can also relate it back to your models. One of the reasons that Haystack is ORM oriented is that it takes information about your models and stores that in the index. So when you pull that document out, Haystack can let you know basically, and it's realized that, hey, this belongs to this model and it's this object in your database. And that can be really helpful. The search form and the search view, which I'm just going to blast through, basically conveniences. You don't need them. The search form operates kind of like a model form. You've got a search method, like a save method, and it returns a search query set. The search view, I think, it's helpful when you just want to get started. It is a class-based view, but it does not look like a class-based view that you're used to in Django 1.4, 1.3. So I've written my own class-based views around this because I don't want to deal with that paradigm. Elasticsearch is the search engine I mentioned. You don't have to use Elasticsearch. If you want to, though, it's really easy to stand up. This is why I originally started working with it. You can use Solr, you can use these others. Elasticsearch is really great if you want to have a bunch of data. It's oriented around installing in the cloud, and it's also supremely easy to just install and just work with right away. You download it if you're on a Mac, you can use Brew, Homebrew. If you're on you can download it on any system, but it's really easy too on a Debian or Ubuntu-based system. You just download the Debian file, install. It doesn't have, you don't have to set up a Tomcat container or Jetty. You just work with the binary, and then you can start interacting with it over curl. So this is kind of my guide here to how you develop your strategy, which is think about how people are going to search for, and really what they're going to be looking for, how they're going to look for content. And this should guide how you set up your search indexes, your views, and everything else. It's not about the data, well, I have these models, and this is related here. You want to think about how do people want to get data out? How are they interacting with this? And that should govern what data you index, how you index it, and how you return it. And when you do that, you need to get data in. You need to update it. If you have content that ever changes, which most people do, you might need to remove some of it. There are a few ways of doing that. One is with some of these management commands here. They're self-explanatory. You can basically, this is really important when you're just getting data in for the first time, let's say. But as it turns out, it's frequently the case that data changes as you go, and so you may not want to just do this in one time. A couple ways you can do this. You can do real-time indexing. So as a model is, let's say, updated, you immediately send that information to the search engine. You can also do kind of a real-time-ish version, which would be a superior choice in most instances, and use a queue. So you have Celery running and say, when this model is saved, send off, add to the queue and have your worker do this later. And you can also do periodic indexing. This would basically be having a cron job run a management command. The reason you might want to do this is if you have content in your index that expires kind of on its own. You don't want to index at a certain point. If it's time-based or there's any other threshold, let's say, I'll make some situation up where when someone likes something 50 times, you don't want people to find it anymore. I don't know why you want to do this. You're crazy. You have this weird thing, but you can't just have it do that maybe on its own. You want there's some other threshold this has to happen. So we've decided we have this mix of strategies. Now you have to actually build your search indexes. And there's a few ways you can get this data in your search index. One is just attributes from your model. On a search index, you're going to have, you're going to say, hey, this index maps to the event model. And there's a title in my index, and that's going to correspond to the name of the event. You can build templates. Again, this is just text content, so you can use an entire template, and you can throw in content from any attribute in the model, from related models, build it. And the other is a field method. And if you're used to, let's say, defining your own validation methods on forms, very comparable. You can basically have whatever content you want, and you can have a method on your class, on your search index that returns any string. So let's see. So I can go through and show you guys. This is and I realized one thing I didn't mention earlier. There's not a whole lot of code in this, but there's some code examples online if you want to go and do some work yourself. Because I don't like showing lots of code up front. The search index works very similar in this instance to a model form. You define a model, and that maps to the specific model. The thing that I think is useful is defining the specific query set here. So if you have, let's say again, we're talking about events, and maybe it's only events that happen in the future should be indexed. You would use your query set here to define that, hey, you know what, this, or my model is only active elements should be indexed. And as you run this, as you update it, this is how you get old or inactive objects out of the search index because they no longer match this query set. When you do this, I think it's really helpful to define a single method using your manager. So if you're actually doing, this would be my recommendation if you're actually using Haystack, is this in mind. Instead of defining this in that method in your search index, so I'm saying, hey, I have this long query set, this, filtering this, filtering that. Do that in a manager method, and every search index just uses, let's say, an indexable method off of a model. You do all the changes there. You never have to touch the search index again, and it's really clean. It's much easier to test as well. So, okay, what models are going into my search engine? You just base it off that manager method that's testable. Geospatial querying, not going to cover too deeply, but you can do it. You can search based on boundaries, polygons, distance. I think it's pretty sweet.
Can you give an example? You just talked about geospatial.
Yeah, so here.
Can you search where you would want to use?
Yelp would be an example, just because so you have a bunch of results and you have a map, and you could search, say, hey, here's a map, and just give me results that happen to be within here. As the map moves, you can just change the boundaries and reset the query.
Okay.
Yes?
And do you need to load in anything auxiliary like GeoDjango or anything like that, or can you just use Haystack alone with Django? Or is that out of the scope of this?
So I discovered that you don't need PostGIS.
Okay.
But I discovered that there were some problems when you don't have some of the geospatial dependencies installed.
Gotcha.
I have an example that's on Heroku, and I was trying to push this, and the point fields caused some problems because in the background, Haystack's importing some of the C libraries. When GDAL's not installed, it causes problems. So in theory, you don't need everything, but it might be helpful.
I was going to say that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's an unfortunate discovery. Improving results quality is very important because of that problem, that two-part problem I mentioned earlier, searching for and looking for. People are looking for things that don't necessarily match up to what they're searching for. So you can help people by adjusting the relevance of documents in the search results. You can do this by boosting the results of certain fields. So certain fields in your document might be more important than others. Maybe that's a title. Maybe that's some sort of tag, actually. And you can boost the relevance of those so when someone matches something in that field, the score is higher. You can do it based on documents, so individual documents might be considered more relevant, and that would be something you'd base off of in your search index. Any arbitrary criteria, this document, well, this document's the Constitution. When it matches this, just boost its relevance, and that's going to be higher in the results. And then you can also just make certain terms more relevant. You can do this in the query set. When you're trying to figure out how to improve people's search experience, you need to understand what they're looking for and what they're getting back. So my suggestion is to log their searches somehow. You don't have to do this with, let's say the search engine is logging. That's going to be very different. But it could be your application log. It could be front end. You can do this with, let's say, Google Analytics. You can use custom events. Keep track of what they're looking for, how many results they got back, whether there are any results. Just get an idea of whether they're actually finding what they're looking for. And I'm going to skip over that part. Cache, you can just store stuff in the document database, basically. But what I wanted to cover briefly is that Haystack has some limitations, and specific to Elasticsearch, we'll get into some of them. Elasticsearch lets you do a lot. It lets you define what kind of analyzer you want to use. It lets you define how you want to map different fields. So here's an example. It's all JSON, and I can declare my own analyzer here. I can say I want to use synonyms. I want to tokenize based on, that's the name, tokenize based on white space and just filter with synonyms. So here's my synonym filter. And in my synonyms text file, I've got some basic synonyms defined. All these things should map to robot. All these words should map to rug. Just want to simplify the tokens here. So I left it away. So how does Haystack let us change this? I think I screwed up my slides here, guys. So here's how Haystack sets up our settings. For Elasticsearch, at least, it creates a connection, sets the settings in with some default settings, and then it maps everything. If it's a string type, so it's not a date, it's not a Boolean, and it gives it an analyzer that's a snowball. Snowball's a really good basic analyzer for the English language. So with Haystack, how do we change this? How do we use our own analyzers? there's really no configurable way of doing it. But it's pretty actually simple to overcome. We'll just define our own backend. And I hope that doesn't it might sound daunting, but it's really not. And in our own backend, we're just going to, again, it's just Python. We'll create a new backend class, inherit from the original, and we'll just call some stuff from our settings. We're going to look and see if there's a default analyzer, define their own settings file, and then we're going to use that in the analyzer. We can actually do some mapping too. This is how define that. We can define both default settings of the individual analyzer and mapping too. So different analyzers. We can define all those things ourselves. We can even do it by field. So if you looked at Haystack, you've noticed that you just declare a field in your search index, but you can't pick out an analyzer. So we're going to modify our backend to allow you to do this on a field-by-field basis. So maybe one field is indexed keywords, another is snowball, etc. And we'll create our own field mixin and just subclass the fields, and we're done. So I'm going to actually wrap up here. There's not a whole lot else because it's a longer talk. But I think that should give you an overview of search, probably leave you wondering, all right, that was a lot of stuff we talked about. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of an idea of what you're going to get into. So I guess at this point, I'll just see if there's any questions. Jen?
You talked about tracking the success of a search. And in my experience as an end user, sometimes I get results, but I still don't consider it a success.
So the other thing so there's two parts to that. One is actually, I would measure success maybe by someone clicking through something. That'd be another thing to measure.
Okay.
With Google Analytics, it's like, I use that as an example because it's really easy to add in this stuff. It's not going to give you the best data though, but that would be the best thing to do is, mimic kind of what Google does, where you're going through and just track, hey, they clicked through on this query and this many results and search for this. And you can see maybe they got 20 results but didn't click on anything. That's going to be a proxy. It's not going to give you a firm answer of whether they found what they wanted to, but it'll be a proxy.
Excuse me. If I'm storing the search index in my database and people are running complex searches on it, isn't that going to tie up my RAM, slow things down for them?
I guess it would. I mean, in this case, you wouldn't actually be storing this. This is a separate, the search engine is going to be separate from the database. So, because I might have glossed over some of that, but you're taking data, the search index is mapping data from the database to the search engine. So when you run, let's say, your update index command, you're connecting to the index and just sending data, let's say over JSON in the case of Elasticsearch, to the search engine. So when people are searching for stuff, they're not hitting the database. Does that make sense?
So it's separate storage, but
Yeah.
then if you're also indexing as you're profiling new content, is that also potentially locking up the database?
That could be, but I mean, you're just reading in that case, so it should be pretty you're just hey, what's here and sending it over.
Could if you're re-indexing the entire database.
Yeah, that would actually probably most likely hit your application, your database, if you're using it.
Which backend are you using in production?
Elasticsearch. Yeah. But yeah.
So I think there's a way, I don't know what it's called, there's a way to, when you search, to do like certain types of matching, like phonings. You can match by sound, that sort of thing, like sound decks, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Is there such a thing here?
I think so, but that's going to be, yeah, that's going to be based on the analyzer, and that's one of the things that's search engine based, which is why the case is really awesome. It gets you like 80% of the way. But there's all these questions that are really search engine specific, and you need to start. That'd be my other piece of advice: is get to know the search engine a little bit, and just even a little bit. See a lot of questions. Like basically, I think that Haystack does this stuff, and it doesn't. It just sends it to the
So what's the difference between Elasticsearch and Solr?
I can give you a reasonable answer. I mean, as far as like using them, well, Solar is an XML interface. Elasticsearch is a JSON interface.
Oh, okay.
A lot of it's the interface. I mean, they both use Lucene, and that's the thing they have in common. Beyond that, I mean, Elasticsearch was rebuilt. I mean, it was built. It wasn't like based on Solar. It was built from scratch with the goal of having something that was really cloud ready as far as setting up nodes together. Cool. So that's something I don't have a need for. All right. Well, if there's any other questions, yeah.
One thing about testing, for example, when you do fixtures,
yeah.
There are no such thing for so you have fixtures for the DB, but it doesn't generate any index. It's something that is not there yet, I guess.
Yeah, that's that was something I had wanted to do slides on, but I hadn't worked on myself. Yeah, if you wanted, there's no like out of the box solution for doing tests against the search engine. Yeah, like you need to kind of create everything yourself. If you wanted to search, if you wanted to test like how your searches are working, you have to kind of build that all yourself. You can, and you could use your fixtures still, and then you'd have to set up a step though of adding to your database and then indexing and then running your tests.
Another thing on Solar versus Elastic, one is easier to use if you consider JSON to be easier than XML. But does Solar have an edge in terms of performance or something else?
I don't know about performance. I mean, Solar is much more. It's more mature. It's more widely adopted. I can't verify. Someone referred to Solar as the Postgres of search engines. I don't think you'd be making a bad choice if you picked Solar for a project.
One more. So when you're updating your documents, apart from running the management commands, if I write to my models in my database, my relational database, can I set certain fields to watch for only update my index when those things change? How does that work? I mean, so to phrase it a different way, can I set a trigger on my models to update my search database?
Yeah, I think you'd want to be using so the way that the real-time indexing and the cube index works is based on signals, and you could set up your own signal handler to do that.
Sorry, I was kind of in and out letting people in, but so maybe you covered this, but I had heard that I haven't messed around too much with the query or the query analyzers or the tokenizers on the back end with Elasticsearch and Haystack, but I had heard that Haystack kind of has difficulty with configurations other than the default Elasticsearch configuration.
It does out of the box. So I wrote it's called Elasticstack. It's untested. It's on PyPI though, and on GitHub, Bennyload. And it's just basically a configurable backend. So where Haystack has a default analyzer and then sets a mapping, I set up so you can pick any default. You can have your own mapping. So you can have one analyzer, a whole bunch, and then pick whatever. Do it field by field, etc.
Thanks.
Cool. Awesome. There's beer up here too.
Sounds good. I guess you've had lots of practice.
How do we switch this? Hey, Ben, how do we switch this?
You need to go to displays.
There's a keyboard shortcut. I think it's like command left or control left.
You can switch the screen in Keynote.
Oh, you can?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, to go to the settings.
I haven't used Keynote very often.
I think Command X or Control X will do it in Keynote.
Let's try it. Yep. Nice job. Here, the opener's right here. Alrighty. So, give me a talk on Django front-end and back-end when they meet. How many people in here do front-end development or consider themselves a little bit of a designer at any sort of point? Okay, so there's a little bit more of you. Yeah, right. So this is sort of a talk of how myself being basically a front-end developer and designer works in Django along with Ben, who is the back-end developer component to myself. So I work at Wellfire Interactive, CodePotter, you all know my favorite color and all that stuff. Reason we what we're going to talk about are 4 things. Front-end devs versus back-end devs, how to set up a Django project so that you'll both be happy, preprocessors and a new look to old ideas, and template tags and filters which help extend the front end of a site through the back end. So East meets West. One of the ideas of the Bosphorus was that is where Asia meets Europe. So it is considered in historical times the East meeting the West. So Istanbul sits on the Bosphorus, and it's where a lot of cultures clash, which in a lot of ways, so back-end development and front-end development have in common, I guess. A lot of talk that Ben gave, I can understand it from a high viewpoint, but as soon as he starts talking about various technologies and modules, I have no idea what he's talking about. So that happens also from the front-end standpoint. So, but any sort of front-ender who comes into a back-end conversation feels like it might be like this. Front-ender battling a bunch of back-enders, and that's how it feels right now. No. But while you think it might be like this, in reality, it might be a little like this. Because back-enders can feel the same way about front-enders. But what we really need it to be is more like this. Best friends who may come from different homes. So some of the things about front-end developers and back-end developers. Server side is obviously the back-end, client side is the front-end. We both live in our own silos. There needs to be a sanity check. A lot of development happens very quickly. Obviously the internet is a large place. There's a lot of developers working on various new technologies. New technologies are, especially with GitHub and things like that, new technologies are pushed out all the time. People are working on different projects. So, Ben may be talking about various back-end modules that are through PyPI, which I thought was PyPI, sorry, that I've never heard of. While at the same time, various CSS or HTML or JavaScript modules have been developed that he may not hear about. So we do live in our own silos, but we do need to talk about it. A lot of things with like the command line interface, Vim, anything like that, if it doesn't have a GUI, then a lot of times front developers and designers will not touch it. So just the same thing with media queries, responsive images, DPI, retina screens, anything that deals with the front end, you guys don't necessarily have to worry about all that often. You do touch it at certain times, but again, it might still just be a mystery and you're just sort of poking the void. Ultimately though, same target, same end goal, we work for the same client, and the client has the same crazy expectations about everything that we do. They don't care about how we're working together, they just want us to work together and get to the final project. We're both smart, both love what we do, and both hate scope change. It affects both of us in any sort of manner, because oftentimes when you change something on the front end, as you'll find later, it does change a lot on the back end. So let's keep the channels open. So does everybody feel good about themselves? Because I'm running out of pictures. So instead we're going to talk about technicals. So we will silence and gnashing. So how do we set up a Django project to work for both front-enders and back-enders? some of these are self-explanatory. I'm sure you all do it always already, such as using a repo, using distributed version control systems such as GitHub, Bitbucket, Codebase HQ. However, front-end developer will expect you guys to be the expert on it, and you should consider it a compliment when we come asking you questions. Mainly, again, because a lot of the power to GitHub and anything like that is through the command line, and we don't like touching that. So there's some great front-end API modules that you should probably include in any project to make your front-end dev happy. Django typography does a lot with content on the front end, changes things to make it look more humanized content, helps with designs such as widows, which are the last word in a sentence that drops down to the next line. Designers hate that. They like it to be all equal. Django form utils. I know someone had talked about how they hated form field sets and all that. I do too. This actually helps you break your forms out into sizable chunks and it enables you to more easily go through those forms. Easy thumbnails. Now I know there's ImageKit back there. Sorry, just heard about it. We'll check it out. But obviously any sort of image processing on the front end is helpful. And Django pure pagination just to help with pagination of results. It is very easy for a front end developer to create a paginator based off of that module. Unit testing, which everyone should be doing. It's awesome. Explain it to us because we don't necessarily do it that often. There's unit testing in JavaScript frameworks, but it's not necessarily possible in HTML and CSS or of course Photoshop. The reason being is much of HTML and CSS is visual and it's also based off of human interpretation of semantics. You can't necessarily unit test that because a paragraph is not necessarily a paragraph in certain instances. And the unit tester would have to have a very good knowledge of syntax and all that kind of stuff, so that just doesn't occur. Other pieces, deployment scripts, they're great. Fabric, Tunis integration such as Circle, Travis, anything like that. Deployment HQ or deploy HQ, which helps for SFTP if you don't have necessarily deep server access. All these actually make it so that there's no mistakes. For the most part, you're not blowing out files that you didn't mean to. In the front end, when you're working with HTML and CSS, you're changing a lot of things real quickly to see if they work, and obviously, as soon as you push it live, something's going to go wrong because data is different, or anything of that nature. A browser that you haven't seen before comes and views your website and somehow breaks it in that browser. So oftentimes the front-end developer will get stressed out and just start poking and prodding things that they really shouldn't be. So this will save your butt a lot. So it will make sure that things are being run correctly when they're pushing them up. Some notes about file structure. We're sharing code, sharing space in the repo and the project. Give us some room to play. Flatter projects or flatter file structure is much better. So try something like this. The deployed app folder, docs folder, wireframes, and just any old name, but I would call it front-end dev. In your deployed app, that's going to be what actually gets deployed to the server. This has maybe your config folder, which has settings and URLs and anything of that nature. Real easy for us who are not necessarily in tune with everything that's happening in Django to find out where those are and look at them, because we do need to look at the URLs, which routes where the user is going to end up when they come to the website. Your individual apps, which are for the CMS or polls or anything of that nature that you're actually creating your customized stuff. And then the static folder, I don't know if you guys can see that in the back, that's where actually all of our stuff lives. The CSS files, JavaScript files, images, anything of that nature that is being used by the site. It would go in a static folder. It gets pulled up by the static tag, which we'll talk about later. But this is very flat. It will allow us to figure out where things are being used and how they're being used. Docs, we use Sphinx-based documentation. Honestly, I've never run Sphinx commands because it's another thing that's on the command line, and I just read the file that Ben puts up there instead. But it does take us a while to get through any sort of backend documentation. Django documentation in and of itself is really great, but a lot of the modules out there don't have very good documentation. And since we're trying to read what's going on and we don't necessarily have as much of a grasp of it as you guys do, it takes us a little while longer. Of course, same thing happens with front-end stuff. A lot of things that we use are never documented, so it's a two-way street. For wireframes, nothing much there. It's just a good place for prototyping and basic browser tests outside of any of the Django applications themselves. If we're doing flat files, trying to test things out, want to show the client something while it's being worked on without any actual data, that's a good place to put it. And finally, sorry, that just quit. Sweet.
Good talk.
Yeah, it was really fast. Sorry.
Yeah, great cliffhanger.
Thanks.
Here for next one.
If it comes back. Okay, that jumped ahead. Sorry. Go backwards. Okay. So, and then the front-end dev area is uncompiled preprocessor files or anything that a front-end dev is putting together for a final form to be used in Django on the actual site, which we are getting to next. So, Byzantium to Constantinople to Istanbul. Istanbul was once upon a time, these past two ones everybody knows, the old They Might Be Giants song, Constantinople, Istanbul. So the way the web was, when a lot of us started out on the web, it was simpler time. Maybe a few tables, some images, link and marquee tags to make it interactive, and a dash of Perl or PHP. I did start out in PHP a long time ago. I went to Cold Fusion, and then became friends with Ben and started a business and decided that I was never going to do that again. Of course, when starting out with any web technology, a lot of times they make you think that it was still the good old days. In terms of Python or Django or anything, they want you to always do a very small web app to start off that you're like, I don't understand why this isn't going to get me to the inroad, where oftentimes when you're learning something, you need to know the next step right away because your client is expecting you to do something with it. So Constantinople, this is the way the web is. Websites are constantly growing in functionality and size, and the not-so-basics back in the day are now basics. A lot of clients expect more functionality right out of the box. Each functional app has a ton of views, or in terms of, for a front-end developer, templates for the various functionality. That's why it says cred. Sanity checks, because of the size of websites are growing, we're starting to use preprocessors. Preprocessors, which I'll get into, have helped ease our mind share on terms of what we're actually looking at. So popular HTML preprocessors, Jade, Haml, and Slim. They're all very similar. What they kind of look like is this. This is actually Jade code. It basically just strips out a lot of the HTML tags, closing tags. You'll notice if you all are familiar with HTML, which I'm sure everybody is, there's no closing tags on any of these elements, and it's just smart and knows that this is a paragraph tag, this is a line list item tag. It's actually a lot easier to go through and parse real fast. Jade, Slim, and Haml are very similar, but you're getting Jade. CSS has stylus, Sass, and less. All are a little bit different from each other. Less is very front-end, based in front-end JavaScript is where it came from. Sass is based in Ruby, and stylus is based in Node. And JavaScript preprocessor is called CoffeeScript. There's only really one. There's a couple other ones, but that's the real big popular one. And then with JS templating, which everybody loves making their own template processors, there's a bunch. Dust.js, Embedded.js, Handlebars, which is a old school one. Swig, which actually looks very much like Django templates. And even AngularJS and jQuery have all their own templating engines inside them, or people like to extend upon them. So why would we want these? As you saw with the HTML, it's really easy to write because it's very fast. You're not having to worry about closing tags, you're not having to worry about all the syntax of writing the open and close brackets and things like that. So you can actually, less writing and quicker to prototype. A lot of them have modules that include and extend and add bits of logic to it. It's very much like Django templates. And again, they're much easier to mentally process. When you're going through a flow of a document that might be very, very large and have lots of modules coming in and out of it, you don't want to get caught up in the amount of if tags and the amount of paragraph tags and div tags that might be running all over the place. Adoption rates have risen as the amount of code grows. Each is better, like I said, than gobs of the regular stuff. We typically use Jade, Stylus, CoffeeScript, and Angular because, at least for me personally, I find them very Pythonic and easy to read and parse. Having looked at Python code in Django, it's a lot easier to take how that is structured and see that that is very similarly structured in these preprocessors. So how can we get Django involved? Well, the first preprocessors, which were actually less and handlebars, started out being run and compiled on the client side. So the user would download the various preprocessed files, the handle file or the less file, and they would also download the compiler along with the page. This in turn would take the less file, process it, and spit it back out to the browser on the client side. This is bad practice because one, they're downloading the compiler along with every page hit or every visit to the site, and it just takes a lot longer. There's no real need to have an uncompiled and dynamic style file running in the browser when you can set that up through JavaScript for singular bits and pieces and just use classes in the CSS to visually change elements. Things have changed a little bit. Sass and Haml are native Ruby, Jade and Stylus native to Node, which is server-side JavaScript. These are better, but still not good enough because they do in turn have to change their the way that you saw the elements, change them actually into plain HTML files to send them to the browser. So Python doesn't seem to have any true preprocessors, at least in terms of ones that are popular or ones that are in use in Django. Perhaps it's the smartest road, but what's available? Aside from Django templates, we have Jinja, Ginshi, Mako, and Cheetah, and those are not necessarily preprocessors. They're actually just templates that use HTML and add specific functionality to the HTML files. Inroads have been made with these modules called PyHaml and PyJade, which in turn, we'll talk about PyJade because we do Jade work. Misses some fun parts of Jade because it's an extrapolation of the original code, but it does work pretty well. It's relatively active. It's not a one-and-run replacement of Django templates. It's still a two-step process. It's taking the Jade, turning it into Django templates, and then serving that up to as plain HTML. Same problems. Even worse, because the actual Jade is it's being turned into Django templates, and then that is being fed into the rendering process in Django. So it's very slow, and it's constantly doing the compilation, so it actually does not allow for cacheable files on the front end because it's continually pre-processing to make sure that it has all the logic in place. So this can bring down servers and be a big pain. So what to do? Designers get dirty with this CLI. Recently, we have been seeing a lot more power users and whatnot starting to use the command line in terms of Bower and Component.js, which are very much like PyPI and bring down modules to the project to use. Now, again, those are through the command line to be able to use them and compile them. Processors. To use preprocessors, you need to pre-compile the HTML for it to be most effective. Again, this is only Myrtle ahead of the game, so you can do all your wireframing in Jade or Handle or anything like that. But in turn, it needs to be processed into the HTML after the wireframes have been complete and then inserted into Django. So you're only marginally ahead of the game because you still have to add Django template tags into the code. You can use Human, Grunt, Brunch.io, or Roots, which are compilers. They have a watch function set up on them, so any changes that are made to an HTML, CSS, JavaScript file, it will run and compile it to those. If you need a GUI or your front dev needs a GUI, there's CodeKit for Mac, FreePost for Windows, and I don't think there's anything for Linux that I found. So most front-end developers and designers that I know do not use Linux, so I think you're probably safe there. So still only halfway there, like I said. So what we've internally started or half release is what we call Jade. It's a one-to-one reading their match to Django templates built-in template tags, and we have a Django CMS operability too. Basically, this just allows a front-end developer to code in Jade or Haml, in this case maybe, like normal, and then it actually, once the compilation happens, spits out a Django template tag already, or Django template file already, so that way there's no need to go through and add the Django template tags to the file. As you can see here, static, show editable page title, regroup, for, block. Those are all one-to-one interpretations of Django template tags that are built into the system. It allows you to code as you would in a regular HTML or J file, and then it spits this all out already in place to just run right into the Django templates. So bridging the gap. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
Could you go back a step? I'm sorry. I think I'm a little behind.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry.
So Jade's a HTML preprocessor.
That's correct.
This makes it nicer.
Easier to process. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And but there's, besides what you guys have, there's no way to use Django tags in your Jade file.
Right. Well, there is a way. As you can see, sorry, I didn't actually stop. You see, this is a Django template variable, and on the actual Jade README file, it would talk about it. You can't actually anything just using Jade for an example, because that's what we're using here. Anything after an element declaration is considered text. Okay, so you could actually put a Django tag or Django variable call in that, and the Jade compiler wouldn't even care.
Okay.
It would just be spit out. Now you can see that in here, that's done here. The main thing is, a lot of times you can just run static linking files directly in an href, but it does not allow these are mixins or functions to be run that way. So that's why we're doing the long form, I guess you would call it, of calling the static file, giving it a variable name, and then calling the variable down here. Does that make sense?
Kind of. So is the problem with the existing tool set that it would run it through the Jade engine and then run it through Django's templating and then send it to the browser and that's slow?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the PyJade, what it does, it takes your Jade files as the user hits a part on the server or a view on the server, goes, finds the template, processes that template, then sends it to the Django template processor, and then serves it. So there's a two-step process rather than this one-step process. And so the processing between these two forms takes up a lot of time, especially when you have a lot of. So if you did this in this is a for loop, so it's looking for how many tiers are in this, and it's going to run through all those and then send those to Django, the actual Django templates.
So, but did you guys consider processing from the Jade to the Django at compile time, or sorry, at deployment time?
I don't. There is a idea that someone has brought up the fact that they would like to see Jade actually as a replacement, one-to-one replacement for Django templates, but that's not been done yet.
So, but what I'm saying is, like, you like using Jade, but it can be slow. But you don't need the Jade part.
Well, deployment is, you're talking about if you know a static data store. On a CMS that would work because someone's working on the deployed process and adding in data. So like this, say this tier group is for sponsors, right? We can have a client come in and add a sponsor to the database.
Right? Is that part Jade?
Yes, this is all. This is all Jade, and this would be too. Yeah.
Okay.
What you're talking about? Well, that's what you're talking about is basically what we're talking about. So this is compiled before it gets sent to deployment.
So I thought Jade generated like static HTML. It didn't have loops and stuff.
It does have. So like if this didn't have this plus sign, right? that would be basically considered a Jade logic thing. So that does exist, which is another reason why it does take a little bit longer in PyJade, because it has to figure out whether you're using the Jade for loop or you're using the Django template for loop.
Okay.
Right. But so what this does is this does compile before deployment. Excuse me. It just is basically these are mixins that are adding in the Django template tags upon compilation time. So it's just allowing us to build everything in this and then push it, and it's compiling it into another location with the Django templates already set. And then we can just push it up there. We don't actually have to look at the Django templates themselves because this is a basic one-on-one representation of it. Does that make sense?
The thing that you built does that? And you guys run that when you do a deploy?
Well, we have a watch function set up on it.
Okay.
So every time this does get changed, it compiles it automatically. Now you can do a compilation upon deploy for that too.
Okay.
All this really needs is just a Jade compiler running on the command line. So if there wasn't a deployment script, if we didn't use what we're using, you could run a deployment script through through Fabric or whatnot that would compile it and push it live as well. It's your own mix of however you want to do it. Yeah.
So you're compiling it client side and then pushing it up to the server?
No, this is being compiled on the development machine.
Right, that's what I mean. I'm sorry, I didn't mean client side like the browser.
Yeah.
So you're doing it locally. Are you then committing the output to a
Right,
repo and
so-
then deploying that to the server?
Yeah, if you remember back in the file structure discussion, there were a series of four base folders. There was the FE dev folder. That would have all this stuff in it, right? And we set up in the configuration file on this to compile on the watch compilation to actually put these files into the slash whatever you want to call your
Templates or
site
something.
name
Sure.
slash
Okay.
templates. So this is being compiled into the actual app space template area.
So you're just pre-compiling Django templates.
Exactly.
That's all.
But-
Committing the Django templates and then deploying the Django templates.
Yeah, this is outside of this is going to be outside of the application area.
Sure.
But it would be in the repo.
Sure.
Okay. Yep.
So, which file do you actually call in a view?
You're actually calling the Django template file
Okay, just
itself.
like this never happened.
Right. This is actually just. I know that you're saying that makes funny, I guess, but So from a front-end developer standpoint, this is much easier to build really quickly. This is also, if you're doing a wireframe for a client, you're going to build it out in this way, and this makes it so that you can easily just go in and add in the Django templates after your client is okay to wireframe. If you're showing them wireframe, obviously, you don't necessarily need to. But this makes it easier for you to add in Django into the templates that are already being done, rather than taking these, building them out of the HTML or compiling them out of the HTML, separating them line by line to add in your Django template tags and your logic. So this is basically just taking the logic that's already in place through Jade and just being able to run it and compile it into Django templates.
Do you have access to all of the functionality of Django templates, like extending templates and how do you do loads and
Sure.
things like that? Do you have
So
access to
again,
that?
because this is just basically sitting on top, if you sent this, if you went and said, wellfireinteractive.com/index.jade, this would just be a text file, right? So that's all this is. It's when it's compiled, it comes out, and these are just these, right? It's just this. It actually just spits this out, but it makes it in a logical format.
Right, but you have equivalents in here to do load statements
Right,
or
yes.
okay, extends.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you need to run Django for this to work.
Sure.
What about those? You mentioned that this has its own for loops, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Why do you
Jade
need those? And doesn't that violate the idea that you also mentioned that this is one-to-one with Django, but it's not really if you have for loops.
Well, Jade is built in Node, right? It is the native Node template system, or one of the native Node templates. It runs through JavaScript. It is JavaScript in a lot of ways.
I see.
So it has a for loop. So I could actually create a list or an object right up here or a grouping of objects, and so then I could create my own hard-coded tiered group up here, have it run through all the tiers for use of prototyping. Again, obviously this can be used in Node by itself as well, because that's where it's based out of. When I say it is a one-to-one because this is creating a Django template for you, right? That's all I'm saying. It's not taking it and then you have to in turn add in code to make it work in Django.
Yeah, I just didn't realize that this is coming from.
Oh, okay, sure.
Sorry, can I?
Yep.
So the J that you guys made, the DJAD,
Sure.
it watches the file, and when it changes, it sends it through the J processor and then saves it into the web app templates folder.
No, not exactly. So the preprocessors that I talked about, let's go back to those. So these four guys are systems that are running and watching your files, and they're the compilers. Okay? So they're the ones that are saying, oh, you change this file, okay, I'll go send it to Jade, I'll go send it to Hamel, I'll go send it to SAS, or any of those preprocessors. Okay? So what the Jade bit that we did is actually just a bunch of mixing. It's a very simple include file that creates localized functions, that allow you to create Django template files.
So if I didn't use what you have, and I was just writing my file and then sending it through the J preprocessor, getting my template at the end, would it look different than what I would write using your tool?
It would, because you would then have to go in and add all the Django template tags.
Because it would confuse the J preprocessor?
No, you're talking about the fact that, sorry, kind of confused here. So Jade has its own set of language, right? So if you just put a for loop, it's not going to spit out a for loop, right? It's not going to spit out any actual Django template code. So this is actually just taking Django template code from a Jade standpoint and being able to spit that out, so you don't have to rewrite it or write it for that specifically. Jade it will just spit out HTML files. This is just saving you the process from then taking those HTML files that it spit out and adding in the Django or the Django template tags.
Were you talking about using Jade with DJ? DJ Jade, or were you talking about using just Jade? Is that what you were saying?
Depends on what part of what I said you're referring to.
It sounded like the question was, if you have your Jade template, like the one you showed, and you run it through Jade with a DJ, do you end up with the same result as if you used these watchers
No, it's just
to do the pre-processing?
It's not an actual processor, right? Jade isn't a processor. It's just an add-on to enable you to output Django template codes through this.
Yeah, my question was, if you're writing it with Jade or writing it with DJ, would what you're writing look different? And the answer is yes, because you have all the expression available in the Django templating engine.
Right.
And the regular Jade.
Right.
All in one file.
Yep.
Getting tired of questions?
Confusing.
Yeah, well, I guess I wasn't prepared, but that's okay.
Well, this is interesting. So the question I have is, what does DJ do beyond basically wrapping a Django template tag in a little, say, extra curly brace?
Sure.
So that it gets passed through as with the same syntax.
Well, basically that's all it does. Now, but that's fine. It's only a little module. It's only supposed to serve its one purpose, right? One thing that's about it is that for like this block, right? So Jade has block tags and stuff like that, but it doesn't have the same output, right? We're saying take a look at the Django, the whatever file we're extending previously. Take a look for the primary block and put this all in there, right? If you were to, this actually is keeping it so that we can still have the indentation that we know and love and that makes sense, mentally. Without those, you could put in Django template tags, possibly. It could possibly run it because it's just thinking that it's gonna just think it's text, right? But at the same time, when you do that, then this all would have to be pushed over because it doesn't understand the indentation anymore. So you would have errors. So this is basically making it so that way you can still code like you would with indentation and understanding, so it's still not a mess when you're creating it, right? So this is basically just a helper for you to code as you would and just output Django template code. Just trying to stop that one process where it's while you're marginally ahead doing it this way and then adding in the Django template code, the tags. This is helping you supersede that process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now that I know what it is, I think it's awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
The paragraph, the final sentence,
Yeah.
without these gracious sponsorships, AFFICOM would not. I think they're missing B. Is that near the?
You know, that would be correct. I will talk to the client about that. Thanks. Okay, so bridging the gap between back end and front end. So what's in the box? Okay, so we love Django and Django Toolbits because of the fact that it doesn't mess with the code that we are creating from prototyping and mess with our designs. At least a lot of older CMSs and frameworks would make it so you have to code their way. With terms of Django and Django templates, you don't. We can code the way that we feel most comfortable with. It comes with a lot of built-in template tags and filters, some of which we touched on in the past 10-15 minutes. But no one wants to code HTML directly